How often have you stood looking up at more jet trails than you ever remember seeing before? Unlike normal contrails, which are usually short in length and short-lived, these thick white plumes linger for hours. Laid down by two or more aircraft in crisscrossing X patterns, tic-tac-toe grids, or perfectly parallel rows, chemtrails turn clear blue skies into a milky overcast, in spite of forecasts calling for sunny weather. The U.S. military and other government agencies deny that anything unusual is happening. Federal aviation authorities insist that these are normal flight operations. But in March 2000, when the U.S. Air Force grounded hundreds of KC-135 jet tankers to fix problems in their tail feathers, chemtrail sightings across the United States dropped from 24 locations to just 2. As the big jets were returned to service over the following week, chemtrail activity climbed right back to previous levels. Someone is stealing our skies. You know it's not passenger planes making these patterns, for these close crossing aerial formations often take place far from charted airways or navigational beacons and break all the rules regarding the permitted proximity of commercial aircraft. Watch carefully and you can see artificial overcasts being made by 3- and 4-engine jet tankers, usually all white or sometimes silver in color. Even individual commercial planes, such as this MD-80 airliner, have been observed with unusually thick trails coming from their tail or wing-mounted engines. In a U.S. Air Force report on owning the weather, Weather Force specialists refer to these spraying operations as aerial obscuration. Contrails like this one usually form at high altitudes when the water vapor in hot engine exhausts momentarily condenses into wispy condensation trails. Though they can sometimes linger, according to the Air Force and Canadian aviation authorities, contrails usually vanish within a minute, like the wake behind a boat. Chemtrails are formed at lower altitudes and do not dissipate. These broad white ribbons are often observed below aircraft flying at higher altitudes that leave no contrails at all. These photographs and video clips were taken in 1999 and the year 2000 over Gabriola Island, Victoria, and Vancouver, British Columbia, Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, Sallisaw, Oklahoma, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Las Vegas, Nevada, Houston, Texas, Columbus, Ohio, and many other locations across the United States. What is going on? After 20 months of research by this investigative journalist and some dedicated researchers, we still don't know for sure. But we do have some compelling clues. A recommendation by the father of the H-bomb, a feasibility study by the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and a patent held by Hughes Aerospace call for spraying clouds of aluminum oxide and other highly reflective metallic particles into the greenhouse gas layer between 24,000 and 42,000 feet. The intent is to reflect enough incoming sunlight to slow runaway global warming. When Edward Teller addressed an international seminar on planetary emergencies in 1998, the Earth's lowest temperatures had just been found to be heating up more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit per century. As Teller called for a planetary sunscreen, the strongest El Niño ever recorded saw swordfish beaching in Scotland. Tropical marlin and mahi-mahi were being caught off the coast of Washington State, and the first Category 6 hurricane ever recorded packed sustained winds of 200 miles per hour. Similar superstorms, droughts, and floods killed 50,000 people that year, and cost insurance companies a record $92 billion, 3 times the annual dollar cost of the Vietnam War. Bigger than big oil and the international trade in arms, insurance companies handling more money than many once sovereign nations are one of the world's largest sources of investment capital. Reeling from catastrophic storm losses, up 1,500% over the previous decade, this powerful lobby pressed Ottawa, Washington, and Whitehall to turn down the heat on global warming. Rapidly rising rates of solar radiation were already sparking epidemics of skin cancers and cataracts across North America, while costing U.S. farmers more than $3 billion in crop losses every year. The choice was stark. Disregarding the potential economic benefits of converting to clean energy, Lawrence Livermore calculated that cutting back fossil fuel burning 20% to 1990 levels would cost the U.S. economy $100 billion a year. But other calculations showed that using 700 Air Force tankers and possibly other aircraft to spray a protective sunscreen overhead could deflect 1% of the sun's energy, enough to neutralize global warming. The annual cost of this aerial spray program? Only $1 billion. No one at Dr. Teller's office knows if this proposed program is being carried out today. But the technology exists. In 1974, the U.S. Navy patented a contrail generation apparatus to spray sunlight-scattering powders from jets. And in 1991, a patent for stratospheric Welsbach seating for reduction of global warming was filed by the Hughes Aircraft Company. Besides reflecting incoming sunlight, Welsbach materials convert heat trapped by greenhouse gases near the surface of the Earth into far infrared wavelengths that radiate out into space. The Hughes patent suggests that these very tiny metal flakes could be, quote, added to the fuel of jet airliners so that the particles would be emitted from the jet engine exhaust while the airliner was at its cruising altitude. A former engineer for Alcoa Aluminum says that aluminum particles as fine as talcum powder will not harm jet engines. He added that the aluminum exhaust called for in the Sky Shield patent would appear as a pure white plume in the sky. Linked with Alzheimer's and osteoporosis, aluminum is a nervous system toxin that can cause many of the symptoms observed after chemtrail exposure. Evidence of aluminum in chemtrails was found in the summer of 1999 after 550 citizens of Espanola, Ontario, brought a petition before the Canadian Parliament to stop spraying by U.S. tanker planes that appeared to be making many residents sick. At a public meeting on chemtrails, the Ontario Ministry of Environment refused to release their air quality readings, but independent laboratory tests of rainwater samples taken after heavy aerial spraying found levels of aluminum particulates 7 times above permissible safe levels. Other instruments later measured a dramatic drop in solar radiation below these artificial overcasts. But clouds also act as a planetary thermostat, averaging day and nighttime temperatures to make this planet habitable. NASA scientists say that even a small change in this delicate cloud balance can, quote, eliminate global warming or greatly enhance it. Ken Caldera, a physicist with Teller's climate modeling group at the Lawrence Livermore Labs, warned a conference of geophysicists that spraying chemicals to form a solar sunscreen could destroy the ozone layer and trigger other devastating consequences. Whatever chemtrails are meant to accomplish, the weather is getting worse. 1999 was the hottest ever recorded in the United States. Winds that hit Europe on the eve of the millennium knocked down 400 million trees, shut down 2 nuclear power plants, killed hundreds of people, and stranded millions more without lights or power from the Netherlands to Naples. For the first time, waterspouts were seen off Vancouver, Canada, and explosive jet stream winds touch down across the United States. Falling temperatures, strong winds, and rain often follow chemtrails, along with acute ailments among people and animals on the ground. Since heavy chemtrail spraying began almost 2 years ago, just about everyone, it seems, is sick or has been ill or knows someone who is sicker than they have ever been before. During the 1999-2000 flu season, the Centers for Disease Control tracked a 31-week epidemic of fatalities from pneumonia and influenza-like illness. But when actual lab tests were carried out on patients jamming doctors' offices and emergency rooms across the U.S., 70% or more did not have the flu. The CDC says an unknown pathogen could be responsible for high death rates, particularly among the elderly, as well as drastic ailments whose origins doctors cannot diagnose. Thousands of eyewitnesses report sudden symptoms of joint pain, nosebleeds, severe headaches, twitching eyelids, upper respiratory distress, earaches, asthma attacks, gastrointestinal bloating and pain, inability to concentrate, extreme dizziness, fatigue, and memory loss, contracted immediately after heavy chemtrail spraying. Can this be coincidence? Government-sponsored 1-800-FLU reporting numbers suggest that the spread of these illnesses is being tracked, just as similar outbreaks have been monitored during 50 years of covert open-air biowarfare experiments on U.S., UK, and Canadian cities. Though few people are aware of this fact, it has been legal to conduct chemical biological warfare tests on the American public for decades. Amended in 1997, Title 50 stipulates that Congress must be notified and informed consent obtained from each test subject in advance of these experiments. Chemtrails are not confined to North America. Eyewitnesses in at least 14 countries are reporting spray activity. During 3 weeks in the winter of 1998-99, the BBC reported refrigerator trucks being used as makeshift morgues to help handle 8,100 corpses, mostly elderly, who died suddenly from influenza-like illness. But the media failed to report the giant white X's over Birmingham and London, as more than 91,000 sick Britishers swamped hospitals and ambulance services. This year, the freezer trucks were back in use, in a grim repetition, said the London Telegraph, of scenes outside hospitals last winter. Once you accept that chemtrails are not contrails, the realization sinks in that the Earth and its inhabitants are being subjected to unprecedented experimentation without our knowledge or permission. In the face of official denials that anything suspicious is going on, the internet and radio airwaves are rife with anxious speculation. Some say the chemtrails are intended to kill us all. Other observers insist that the disorientation and lethargy resulting from chemtrail exposure is intended to make citizens compliant to the New World Order and enslave us all. Based on the evidence presented in this video, the producers believe that the most plausible explanation for this massive aerial spraying is a planet-wide, high-tech campaign against catastrophic climate change. If this is true, such a desperate Band-Aid solution disregards the fundamental causes of global warming in order to protect powerful financial interests by permitting pollution and profits as usual. It has been the experience of all who have reported chemtrail activity that federal, state, and provincial governments refuse to acknowledge chemtrails. Though denials come from every level, authorities responsible for public health, safety, and the environment say they will act when forced by the public to do so. If public pressure is the key, then the most effective action is to alert people to what is taking place right over their heads. Take this tape or your own footage and chemtrail photos to your local television stations. Remember, cable producers are required to broadcast local content as public service announcements. Don't be afraid to speak out. You'll be surprised how many people are noticing the unusual proliferation of jet trails but don't know what they're seeing. When enough people learn that these puzzling plumes are really chemtrails, and that we are being sprayed with unknown substances without our informed consent, the message will spread, and our leaders will be compelled to respond to the concerns of citizens who have seen for themselves the mystery lines in the sky.
Chow.
Love those dog stories.
It sounds like a government plot hatched right from the X-Files.
But some say this is fact, not fiction.
I know something is not normal, and we just want to know what it is.
98% of us die eventually.
Die, they say, from a secret program of spraying.
There's absolutely no basis to suspect that the contrails you see today are any different than they were ever before.
Eventual elimination.
I feel that what they're doing is experimenting in the disbursement of bioagents and poisonous toxins.
There are a lot of people with spare time, and sometimes they let their imagination get away with them.
God help us.
You may be wondering why one of the researchers we had there wanted us to conceal his identity. He says an intermediary told him a paid assassin for the government issued a warning that anyone who went public about chemtrails was in danger of disappearing.
Tomorrow night, only on Fox, The Skinny on fat-free food.
I first became aware of Will Thomas and his work in 1989, when my wife Sephora and I contributed a piece of street theater to a dioxin protest Will organized at a nearby pulp mill. We followed with interest his reports from Kuwait during the Gulf War, and were later deeply disturbed by the video he made documenting the oil spills and environmental destruction that was minimized by the mainstream press. Will's commitment to his work impressed me, and when he told me about chemtrails, I believed him. When my wife and I flew to England in September of 1999, I videotaped these trails from the airplane as we circled over London. I thought they might be the chemtrails Will was talking about. But all of this footage was shot purely as tourist video in Birmingham and then in London. I didn't notice the chemtrails while shooting or even while watching the video at home. Only after we began this Chemtrails video project did I really see what I had inadvertently shot in England. As an artist, I pay a lot of attention to the sky, having learned to paint clouds in considerable detail and complexity. So it came as a big surprise that I had been completely blind to what I was taping that day.
April 3rd, year 2000.
The next year, in April, we tried shooting this on-camera narration on the street in front of my house. Later that month, when I went out early to take pictures to use in my paintings, I caught this plane in the act. After 3 hours, I returned to the same spot to record the lingering plumes, still visible and slowly spreading across the sky. In June, Will and I were well into editing the footage and photos he had collected from people all over the U.S. One day I got up before dawn and noticed a series of parallel trails in the morning twilight. They stretched from directly overhead, east towards Vancouver. It was clouding over where the trails were, but to the west the sky was clear. It seemed that the planes were working east to west, following the edge of daybreak. I grabbed my camera and headed for the place we call the Maples, where there is an unobstructed view.
Well, I came down here to catch the area of blue sky thinking that this is where I would find the planes, and I did. And as they have flown over, the cloud cover has definitely moved this direction. And we'll see if another plane flies over in this clear blue area before too long, since they've been coming roughly every 15 minutes. I've seen 3 already.
It was the right idea. I set up my tripod and was able to shoot plane after plane, spraying white plumes in parallel rows that span most or all of the sky. Using my digital zoom, I captured these shots clearly showing the red stripe on the tail and 4 plumes originating from the jet engines.
Well, this one certainly looks like the streams are coming out of the engines, not the tail tips. I got 3 at once here. 3 planes at once, running parallel patterns.
Over the next 3 hours, my camera recorded the transformation from obvious man-made trails to diffuse and wispy smears that most people, just rising and heading out for their day, might likely assume were clouds, if they noticed them at all. The last plane in the series was different. Only 2 plumes emerged from this aircraft, seemingly from the tips of the tail, and no red stripe was visible. This was Saturday. Sunday was completely overcast. Monday through Thursday I noticed isolated chemtrails far apart in the sky, sometimes only visible through gaps in the cloud cover.
Here we are 4 days after the last fairly intense spraying. I'm getting up here early in the morning and there's just this one lone trail across the middle of the whole breadth of the sky.
On Friday, under a bright blue sky, I returned to the Maples to document another extensive spraying session involving several planes. Since then, I have noticed chemtrails many times, not always with my camera available. As I would point chemtrails out to other people, there have been a variety of responses. Some were quick to acknowledge that they had also noticed this activity. Others reacted with stubborn skepticism or fearful denial. I have proof enough for me. There's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear.